You've been one of the most important voices on the ongoing situation in Ukraine. And, we hear from the US propaganda machine that Ukraine was doing so great for the past year and a half, 2 years. And now even Washington Post is talking about Russian troops advancing to Kiev and that Ukraine is running low on air defenses. So can you say what you're seeing there and what you think could happen in the next few months?
This is the culmination of what I've been saying for a long time now. We talk basic military math, correlation of forces. The Ukrainians, just to keep it simple, they burn through resources. And when I say resources, I'm talking about men. That means dead men, just so you know, equipment, destroyed equipment. They're burning through resources quicker than these resources can be replenished. And so every day that goes by, Ukraine gets weaker. Russia, on the other hand, is accumulating resources quicker than Ukraine can burn them through. So every day that goes by, Russia gets stronger. Then you add to that, that's not just a quantitative aspect, the qualitative aspect comes in too. The Russians have very good equipment and they have lots of it. Ukrainians have some good equipment, but not much of it. Some of that equipment was holding the Russians at bay. Air defense systems helped keep Russian air power from being committed in a decisive manner, but the Ukrainians now are out of air defense systems. So the Russians are having sort of a field day right now, dropping these guided bombs wherever they want to drop them. And these things are deadly accurate. They're killing, the number of Ukrainians that are dying a day is around 1,000, 1,500. The Russian casualties in a day can be counted at less than 100. But the Russians are recruiting 1,500 men a day to fill. So every day is Russia is getting a 1,400 man addition to their force. The Ukrainians are losing 1,500 guys, and they're getting 200 guys to replace them. So the Ukrainians are getting weaker by leaps and bounds.
And that's also why they're calling 60-year-olds in to fight.
Right. Well, they just passed a law to call in 20-year-olds, but here we come up with an interesting fact about Ukraine. The unique demographics of the situation that Ukraine finds itself in from a historical standpoint is that at this point in time, the Ukrainian demographics, even before the war started, the ideal combatant age group, 20 to 24, there's the lowest number ever. If you look at the population, they have a large number of, let me get my hand up here. I'll go this way. Babies here, but then it drops down to the 24-year-olds and then comes back up to the older people. There's this dip here. So even though they passed a law that says draft all the 20 to 24-year-olds, there's none of them left. They're either all dead or they fled the country. There's nobody left. The Ukrainians are left dragging 50, 60-year-old men off the streets. And to give you another example, and this comes straight from the mouth of Arestovich, the former advisor to Zelensky. And he said, he's reading about how in Russia today, men in their 40s are flocking to hospitals. And you'd say, well, they're looking for exemptions. They don't want to be caught up in this war. No, they're going to the hospital because the military won't take them because they have a chronic medical condition. These men are spending their own money to get these chronic medical conditions reversed, fixed, so they can go to the recruiter and sign up for this war. Why? Because they're not to make money. These guys are all gainfully employed. They're going to make more money being civilians than they do being this. They're doing this because this war is seen by every Russian as their patriotic duty. This is the big war for them. This is the defeat of not just Nazi ideology in Ukraine, but they view this war as the collective West against them, a war of their existential survival. So men who would otherwise stay at home, take care of their families are saying, you have to go to war. And that's the thing. All these 40-year-old men sitting there going, I ain't going to be telling my kids I was shoveling poop in Moscow. I want to tell them I was on the front line doing my duty. And so these guys, the Russians, are desperate to be part of this because this is their moment in history. This is their fight. And so when they go there, they're fighting for a cause they believe in. Now imagine yourself being a Ukrainian who's trying to run away. You get thumped on the head, thrown into a van, sent to a training camp where they don't trust you enough to actually let you handle the ammunition and the gun too much. And then they throw you in the front line with no training, no leadership, nothing. They just throw you out, surrounded by guys who think the same way. None of you want to be there. And you're going up against the Russians whose sole purpose right now is to close with and destroy you through firepower and maneuver. And they have a lot of firepower. They know how to maneuver, and they really want to do this thing. This is a one-sided fight. It's tragic, actually, because it could have been avoided, but it's happening. It's real, and Russia's winning.
Absolutely could have been avoided. I was shocked. I don't know if you were, that the New York Times a few months ago admitted that the CIA had bases, or at least facilities, in the forests on the border of Russia as early as 2014. I think probably earlier, but they admitted at least 2014. And yet this was so-called unprovoked, right?
Yeah, no. But it's not just that. I mean, you dig into what the CIA was doing. I mean, there's standard espionage. Spying is the second oldest profession in the world after the first oldest, which is prostitution. And spies make use of prostitutes to corrupt individuals for recruitment. So they're closely linked. So
yeah,
actually, I don't want to link them too close because it's an insult to prostitutes. The CIA, I'm sorry, the CIA, now we know what kind of CIA people were there in the lead up to this war. They're from the Special Activities Center from Ground Branch. These are paramilitary guys who trained the Ukrainians in terrorism. So when the Russians are saying, hey, we see the hand of the West in the Crocus City Hall terror attack, the Russians aren't making this up. The Russians know exactly what happened. They know who funded it. They know who trained them. The American people are asleep at the wheel. Your audience does understand that the Russians have the most capable, efficient nuclear arsenal in the world today. It outclasses ours by orders of magnitude. They're more accurate, they're faster, they're more reliable, they're newer, they're more survivable. And the Russians are serious about their doctrine that says if you threaten us with nuclear weapons or you threaten us, our existential survival, we will use these nuclear. Russia's not a joke. This concept of Russians are a bunch of drunk guys who go out and wrestle with bears in the woods. I mean, they may wrestle with bears in the woods, and they may get drunk, but they're more than that. This is a real nation full of real people that has a real purpose. They're very serious. We need to treat them as serious. How would we feel? Well, I'll ask this question too. Do you remember that intelligence report back when we were in Afghanistan, the war that we would never leave because we're there for the end? We're there for you, buddies. We're there for the Afghan people. We're there for the Afghan women. We will never abandon you. Bam, we're gone. That war. Do you remember the report? The Russians were paying the Taliban bounties to kill American soldiers.
Yeah.
They dug into it. You found out that it revolved around 3 dead American soldiers and one American soldiers, 1 dead American, 1 too many. 3 dead Americans that we were accusing the Russians of paying a bounty to the Taliban to kill. It was all a lie. It turned out it was a lie. Never true. But how enraged everybody was. 3 Americans died because the Russians paid the Taliban to kill them. Like you'd have to pay the Taliban to kill Americans. But that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Now let's look what we're happening today. You got Lindsey Graham and other senators saying that the provision of billions of dollars of aid to the Ukrainians is the best expenditure of money in the world. He says because for a fraction of our defense budget, we're empowering the Ukrainians to kill lots of Russians. And this is a good thing. I'll just make this point. One day this war is going to end, Lee. And when it ends, we're going to have to sit down at the table with the Russians. And know this, that we'll be sitting down at the table of somebody who lost a family member to this war, lost a father, lost an uncle, and they lost him because the United States enabled the Ukrainians to kill Russians in a losing cause. We knew the Ukrainians were never going to win. We know the Ukrainians didn't start this fight. This was a self-defensive act by the Russians. And yet we, till the bitter end, because we don't care about the Ukrainians. We don't care about them at all. We've sacrificed over 500,000 of their lives. Tens of millions of people are displaced. We've destroyed their country. And we're still saying, do more, do more. The Ukrainians are finally waking up going, wait a minute. All we're doing is dying. Bing, you broke the code. But we don't care about the Ukrainians, and we damn sure don't care about the Russians. But the Russians know who's killing them. They know who's responsible for this. And if we ever want to live in peace and harmony with these people, we're going to have to beg forgiveness for what we've done. Because unlike that fake news story in Afghanistan, we are really paying the Ukrainians to kill Russians.